Slap. He harshly slapped me across the face in front of his first love, causing my eardrums to ring. Lynn, have you caused enough trouble? Do you have to make it this ugly? I covered my face, watching him carefully protect the woman in his arms, my heart turning to ashes. The next day, he seemed to have a pang of conscience, bringing gifts to coax me. But upon opening the door, the house was empty. His secretary timidly handed over a document. Ethan, Madam came by this morning, left this, and departed. The crystal chandelier in the dining room refracted cold light. The air was filled with the aroma of truffles and steak, along with the cool fragrance of the white roses I had personally arranged. Today was our third wedding anniversary. I had been busy since 3 in the afternoon, preparing a full table of Ethan's favorite dishes. The wall clock's hour hand pointed to 10, and the dishes had been reheated 3 times. My heart was gradually growing cold as well. Finally, the sound of the door lock turning came from the entrance. I immediately stood up, forcing a smile I had practiced countless times, and went to greet him. Ethan, you're back. My words stuck in my throat when I saw the person following behind him. Chloe. His first love, the sister he always mentioned. She was wearing a pure white dress, with exquisite makeup, intimately linking arms with Ethan like a proud princess. And my husband, Ethan, in suit and tie, looked as usual, as if bringing another woman back to our home was the most normal thing. He didn't even glance at me, directly leading Chloe to the living room sofa. Lynn, pour 2 glasses of water. His tone was matter-of-fact, like ordering a household servant. I froze in place, feeling my blood solidify in an instant. Chloe's gaze swept over the exquisite dishes on the table, a barely noticeable contempt flashing in her eyes. She suddenly raised her hand, as if just noticing, and said coquettishly to Ethan, "Brother Ethan, look at you, insisting on buying this necklace for me. How embarrassing." My gaze was captured by the dazzling diamond necklace around her neck. It was the tears of the Milky Way. At last week's charity gala, I had mentioned to Ethan that I liked it. He had only faintly hummed in response at the time, and I thought he hadn't taken it to heart. It turned out he remembered. But this surprise wasn't for me, his legitimate wife. Suppressing the surging bitterness and anger in my chest, I walked step by step toward them. Ethan. I called his name, my voice trembling slightly from extreme restraint. On our 3rd anniversary, you bring another woman home and give her the tears of the Milky Way. What do you take me for? Ethan finally deigned to look at me. There was no trace of guilt in his eyes, only impatience at being disturbed. Lynn, Chloe just returned to the country, I'm just being a good host. It's just a necklace, do you have to make such a fuss? Just a necklace. My efforts, my expectations, my marriage, perhaps in his eyes, they were all just. Chloe timidly hid behind Ethan, showing a weak and innocent expression. Sister-in-law, don't misunderstand, brother Ethan and I are just friends. This necklace is too valuable, I'll return it to him tomorrow. Her hypocritical demeanor completely ignited my long-suppressed anger. Shut up. You have no right to speak here. I almost roared. Ethan, make her leave my home. My voice was sharp, shattering the hypocritical calm in the living room. Chloe shuddered in fright, her eyes instantly reddening. It seemed like she tripped over something, her body softening as she exclaimed and fell to the side. Everything happened too quickly. I didn't even see clearly how she fell. Ethan, like a beast whose reverse scale had been touched, rushed forward in one stride to support her. Then, he turned around, his icy eyes glaring fiercely at me. Lynn, are you insane? In the next second, a slap carrying the wind harshly landed on my face. Slap. The crisp sound shook my eardrums into ringing. My left cheek burned painfully, like it had been branded with a hot iron. The whole world went silent. I could hear my heart shattering inch by inch. Covering my face, through blurred vision, I watched Ethan carefully protect Chloe in his arms, softly comforting her. Chloe, don't be afraid, are you hurt anywhere? It was a gentleness I had never seen. I was like an outsider, a clown, watching him and his first love perform a deep affection. It turned out that my love, my endurance, my concessions, were exchanged for this heart-piercing slap. Heart turned to ashes. I had never experienced these words so profoundly. Looking at him, I suddenly smiled. No hysteria, no tears. Just calmly, word by word, I said, "Ethan, have you caused enough trouble? Do you have to make it this ugly?" I returned the words he had just questioned me with, unchanged. His action of protecting Chloe paused, a flash of astonishment on his face. Perhaps in his view, I should cry, make a scene, not be as terrifyingly calm as now. I no longer looked at them, turned around, and walked up the stairs step by step. Behind me, Ethan seemed to want to say something but ultimately didn't speak. That night, I kept my eyes open until dawn. The bedroom door was never pushed open. The first ray of morning sunlight shone in, and I calmly got up, washed, and applied makeup. The woman in the mirror had a pale face, with clear fingerprints still on her left cheek. I covered that humiliating mark with thick foundation. Then, I went to the hospital. When I received that thin report from the doctor, my hand did not tremble. Returning to the villa I called home, it was empty inside. I walked into the study, took out a document from the bottom drawer. Divorce agreement. I had prepared it long ago, but never had the courage to sign my name. Now, Ethan had made the decision for me. I took out a pen and wrote Lynn in the wife's signature column. The strokes were crisp and decisive, without the slightest hesitation. Then, I placed the pregnancy test report together with the divorce agreement in a file folder. As I left, I took one last look at this house filled with 3 years of memories between him and me. Once so warm, now so ironic. Goodbye, Ethan. Goodbye, my humble love. Downstairs at Ethan's company, I handed the file folder to his secretary. When Ethan returns, give this to him. The secretary looked at me with a mix of sympathy and inquiry but respectfully accepted it. I turned and walked away, without the slightest reluctance. Phone turned off, Facebook blocked, all contact methods related to him were deleted one by one. I didn't go back to my parents' home. I knew if Ethan couldn't find me, he would go there. I didn't want my parents to worry about me, nor did I want them to face the Gu family's dominance because of me again. Using a new SIM card, I booked a ticket to a seaside small town. I wanted to completely disappear from his world. On the other side, Ethan had probably spent the night with Chloe in a hotel. He thought it was just a slap, I would throw a tantrum overnight and that would be enough. The next day, he returned to the villa like a benefactor, carrying a limited edition bag he had specially bought from the counter. He thought he would see a wife with red, swollen eyes, waiting for him to coax her. But upon pushing open the door, he was greeted only by a room of desolation. On the dining table, the dishes I had carefully prepared last night were completely cold, covered with a layer of solidified grease. He frowned, an inexplicable irritation rising in his heart. "Lynn?" He called out, but no one answered. He went upstairs, pushed open the bedroom door. The bedding was neat, without wrinkles. In the dressing room, my clothes, bags, and jewelry were all gone. I hadn't taken any of the things he bought for me. I only took a few everyday clothes I had bought myself. Ethan's heart began to sink. A panic he had never experienced before wrapped around his heart like vines. At that moment, his phone rang. It was his secretary. "Ethan, Madam came to the company this morning, she asked me to give this to you." Ethan immediately drove to the company. He took the craft paper file folder from his secretary's trembling hands. His fingers were somewhat disobedient as he irritably tore open the seal. The first thing that fell out was the divorce agreement. The 2 words Lynn stung his eyes painfully. He clutched the papers, veins bulging on the back of his hand. This woman dared to propose divorce to him? Who gave her the courage? Anger burned in his chest, he almost tore the agreement to shreds. But at that moment, another thinner paper floated lightly to the ground. It was the pregnancy test report. Ethan impatiently bent down to pick it up. When he saw the words clearly, his whole body froze. Early pregnancy, 6 weeks plus. Pregnant? Lynn was pregnant? This realization exploded like thunder in his mind. He remembered last night's harsh slap. He had slapped his pregnant wife. Clang. The file folder slipped from his hand, and the limited edition bag also fell to the ground with a dull thud. Ethan's face instantly turned deathly pale, devoid of color. He staggered back 2 steps, his legs weakened, and he collapsed embarrassingly to the ground. Panic. Unprecedented panic flooded over him like a tide. He frantically took out his phone and dialed my number. "The user you have dialed is powered off." The cold mechanical female voice hammered harshly at his heart. He then tried to message on Facebook. The bright red exclamation mark reminded him that he had been blocked. He never knew that the always gentle and obedient Lynn could be so resolute. She had taken his child and completely disappeared from his world. Ethan slumped on the cold floor, feeling for the first time what despair truly meant. Ethan went mad. He mobilized all his connections and networks, casting an airtight net over the entire city. Airports, train stations, highway exits, all available surveillance footage was scrutinized frame by frame. But he couldn't find me. I had evaporated from the world. No credit card transactions, all social accounts cancelled, even my usual ride-hailing apps showed no login activity. I had erased all traces that could reveal my whereabouts. 2 days later, with nothing to show, Ethan finally thought of my parents' home. Carrying bags of gifts, he appeared at my family's door, where my father opened it. Seeing him, my father showed no expression and immediately tried to close the door. "Dad." Ethan hurriedly blocked the door with his hand, his voice hoarsely unrecognizable. "Where's Lynn? Is she here?" My father looked at him coldly. "There's no one named Lynn in our family, you've got the wrong place." "Dad, I know I was wrong. Let me see her, I'll apologize to her." Ethan lowered his posture extremely, even with a pleading tone. My mother, hearing the noise, came out from inside. Looking at Ethan, the disgust in her eyes was undisguised. "Ethan, we can't afford your dad. When we entrusted Lynn to you, it was in the hope that you would treat her well, not trample on her. We'll cherish our own daughter, no need for you, the big CEO, to bother." With that, my mother forcefully closed the door, shutting out Ethan and his expensive gifts. Standing outside, hearing the suppressed crying from inside, Ethan tasted helplessness for the first time. He recalled the 3 years of marriage with Lynn. She was always so gentle, so considerate. Every day when he returned home, there were hot meals. If he casually mentioned liking something, she would prepare it the next day. She remembered all his preferences clearly, Chloe. But what about him toward her? He didn't even remember what she liked to eat or her birthday. He took her efforts for granted, her obedience as a habit. Only upon losing her did he realize that the woman he had ignored for 3 years had already permeated every corner of his life. Regret, like poison, gradually eroded his vital organs. As he leaned dejectedly against the wall, his phone rang. It was his mother, Mrs. Debbie. "Ethan, where have you been these days? Chloe has been wronged, and you don't even accompany her more. Why bother with that immature Lynn? Hurry and bring Chloe home to comfort her properly." His mother's righteous accusation sounded particularly grating at this moment. If it were before, he might have complied with her arrangements. But now, he felt an unprecedented annoyance. "Mom, stay out of my affairs from now on." For the first time, he spoke to his mother in such an icy tone, then hung up directly. Leaning against the cold wall, his mind was in chaos. He didn't know where to look for me, nor how to face me if he found me. Could the home he had shattered with his own hands be pieced back together? When the plane landed, the salty sea breeze brushed my face, carrying a tangy sweetness. I arrived in this southern seaside small town. No acquaintances, no past, perfect for a fresh start. Using the little savings I had, I rented an apartment with a sea view. The house wasn't large, but it had good sunlight. I severed all ties with the past, including my parents. I knew they would worry, but I also knew that as long as I stayed in contact with them, Ethan would always find a way to locate me. I had to be ruthless. On the third day after settling in, early pregnancy symptoms began. Nausea, vomiting, dizziness, drowsiness. I couldn't eat anything, the slightest smell of cooking oil made me vomit violently. I lost a full circle of weight. That afternoon, while shopping at the supermarket downstairs in the community, just after paying, an intense wave of nausea surged. Covering my mouth, I rushed to the roadside trash bin and vomited until the world spun. My stomach was empty, only bile came out. In my utter disarray, a bottle of warm water and a pack of tissues were handed to me. I looked up and saw a man in a white coat. He was tall, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, with gentle features and a clean demeanor. "Drinking some warm water will make you feel better." His voice was like him, gentle and polite. I took the water, rinsed my mouth, and felt the burning in my throat ease considerably. "Thank you." I lowered my head, my voice still hoarse. "You're welcome." He looked at my pale face, then at my shopping bag on the ground, which contained several boxes of folic acid for pregnant women. He asked softly, "Severe early pregnancy symptoms?" I nodded. "I'm an obstetrician at the nearby hospital, my name is Samuel." He introduced himself and gave some professional advice. "Try eating soda crackers or drinking lemon water when you get back, it can alleviate morning sickness. Eat small, frequent meals to maintain nutrition." His words were clear and logical, instinctively convincing. I was grateful to him, but more so wary. After experiencing Ethan, I instinctively kept distance from all men who approached proactively. "Thank you, Dr. Samuel, I'll be careful." I distantly thanked him, picked up my things, and prepared to leave. He seemed to notice my guard and didn't say more, just smiled gently. This encounter was just a small interlude in my new life. I quickly immersed myself in the busyness of making a living. I studied jewelry design in university. Although I became a full-time housewife after graduation, I hadn't completely abandoned my profession. I registered a new social account and started taking freelance design jobs online. From the simplest logo designs to complex custom jewelry sketches. The money wasn't much, but enough for me and the baby's living expenses. Every day, drawing, eating, sleeping, walking by the sea. Life was calm like stagnant water, but my heart was unprecedentedly peaceful. I thought Samuel and I would have no further interactions. Until 2 weeks later, when I went to the hospital for my first formal prenatal checkup. Entering the consultation room, I was stunned to see the person sitting behind the desk. He was somewhat surprised too, but quickly regained his gentle smile. "It's you? What a coincidence." It was Samuel. My prenatal doctor turned out to be him. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, more than a month had passed. Ethan had mobilized all possible forces, yet still had no news of me. He was like a beast trapped in a cage, unable to find an exit, only pacing anxiously in place. The once lofty Goo Corporation president now became decadent and haggard. Every day, he stayed in what was once our home, guarding the cold emptiness, repeatedly dialing the number that was always off. He had no heart to handle the piled-up company documents, numbing himself with alcohol all day. Meanwhile, Chloe took this opportunity, under the guise of visiting and caring, to frequently enter the Goo family old residence and Goo Corporation. In front of the company employees, she assumed the posture of the future mistress, directing Ethan's secretary and even trying to interfere in company affairs. The employees gossiped privately. "This Miss Chloe is too presumptuous, isn't she? The president's wife hasn't even divorced yet." "Exactly, I heard the president's wife was driven away by her, now she's usurping the nest, such clever tactics." These words reached Chloe's ears to some extent, but she didn't care. In her view, as long as Ethan and I divorced, the position of Mrs. Goo would eventually be hers. Watching Ethan's growing despondency, she felt smug on one hand and anxious on the other. She needed a spark to completely burn away all of Ethan's thoughts of me. That day, she again brought soup she had personally stewed to Ethan's office. Ethan sat behind his desk, eyes bloodshot, with several empty wine bottles in front of him. "Brother Ethan, don't torture yourself like this, your health is important," Chloe softly advised, placing the soup in front of him. Ethan didn't even glance at her, just staring blankly at my photo on his phone screen. Jealousy and malice flashed in Chloe's eyes. She sighed seemingly unintentionally. "Brother Ethan, actually, I think sister-in-law might not come back." Ethan's expression finally fluctuated. Chloe continued to escalate, cautiously probing. "Think about it, sister-in-law is pregnant, hasn't contacted you for so long, hasn't gone for checkups. I heard that if it's early, the surgery is quick and doesn't affect the body much." Her words were like a poisoned knife, precisely stabbing into Ethan's deepest fear. "Abort the child." These 4 words made his blood freeze. He abruptly looked up, his scarlet eyes glaring fiercely at Chloe, the brutality and killing intent in them making Chloe's heart tremble. "Shut up." He swept the soup bowl off the table, splashing hot soup all over Chloe. The sharp sound of porcelain shattering was ear-piercing. "Who allowed you to speculate about her like that? She's not like you." This was the first time Ethan had lost his temper so badly at Chloe. Frightened, Chloe's face turned ashen, tears instantly welling up. "Brother Ethan, I was just worried about you. I didn't mean it." But Ethan seemed not to hear her sobs. His mind was in turmoil, Chloe's words echoing like a curse. He began to doubt. Doubt his long-held perception of Chloe. Would the pure and kind little girl in his memory really utter such malicious speculations? A terrifying thought flashed in his mind. On the night of the 3rd anniversary, was Chloe's fall really an accident? He abruptly stood up, picked up the intercom phone, his voice ice-cold without warmth. "Investigate all surveillance after Chloe came to the company to find me on the 3rd anniversary evening, and all recordings of her in the villa." For security, the Gu family villa had hidden surveillance and recording devices. Only he and the security supervisor knew about this. He wanted to uncover the truth. No matter what it was, he had to get to the bottom of it. The investigation results came out quickly. Ethan sat in the dim office, watching the surveillance playback on the screen over and over. In the video, Chloe in the living room, taking advantage of him going to the kitchen for water, walked up to me. Her face lacked the usual weakness, replaced by a condescending provocation. The recording device clearly captured her voice. "Lynn, you think marrying brother Ethan makes you Mrs. Gu? You're just a substitute, a nanny responsible for his life. The one brother Ethan loves has always been me. If not for my family's incident back then, you wouldn't have had a chance to marry him. Look, he prefers to accompany me on your wedding anniversary rather than go home to see you. Don't you know who's more important in his heart?" At the end of the video, when I emotionally told her to get out, she twisted her own ankle, deliberately falling in a direction without obstacles, weakly and bonelessly. Every frame, every word, was like a heavy hammer smashing harshly into Ethan's heart. The first love he had carefully protected, the girl he felt he owed so much to, turned out to be a cleverly disguised venomous snake. It was her, using malicious words to provoke me. It was her, using superb acting to set me up. And he was the foolish executioner, personally stabbing the knife into the wife who loved him most. Ugh, a violent retching surged to his throat. Ethan rushed into the bathroom, vomiting heart-wrenchingly. What he vomited was not just overnight alcohol, but endless self-loathing and regret. The first love filter that had covered his heart for years shattered completely at this moment, leaving only nauseating filth. He splashed cold water on his face, returned to the office, and dialed Chloe's phone. "Come to the company." His voice was cold, as if fished from an ice cellar. Chloe thought he had come around to comfort her, dressed up flamboyantly as she arrived at the company. As soon as she entered, she saw the surveillance footage playing on the screen in front of Ethan. Her face turned deathly pale in an instant. "Brother Ethan, let me explain." Ethan looked up, the disgust and coldness in his eyes something she had never seen. "Explain? Explain how you deliberately provoked the relationship between Lynn and me? Explain how you acted in front of me?" Chloe's body swayed, tears streaming down. She threw herself at Ethan's feet, clinging tightly to his pant leg. "Brother Ethan, I was wrong. I really was wrong. It's because I love you too much, I was afraid of losing you, that's why I did such a foolish thing. Forgive me this once, okay?" She cried pitifully, tears like pear blossoms in rain. If it were before, Ethan might have softened. But now, he only felt immense disgust. At that moment, the office door was pushed open. Debbie, my former mother-in-law, arm in arm with Chloe's mother, entered beaming. Seeing Chloe kneeling on the ground, Debbie's face changed, and she immediately went forward to help her up. "What's this? Ethan, how can you treat Chloe like this?" She turned to glare at Ethan, her tone full of reproach. "I'm telling you, you must divorce that woman Lynn immediately. Then marry Chloe grandly." Ethan wearily pinched his brow. "Mom, this is my business, stay out of it." "Stay out?" Debbie's voice instantly rose. "How can I stay out? Our Gu family absolutely cannot let the Chu family's daughter suffer the slightest grievance." She said this righteously, but it raised strong doubts in Ethan's heart. The Gu and Chu families were just ordinary business partners, their relationship wasn't deep enough for this. Why did his mother repeatedly emphasize not letting the Chu family's daughter suffer? What unknown secrets were hidden behind this? Looking at his hysterical mother and Chloe hypocritically wiping tears on the side, he felt enveloped by an invisible net, pressing him breathless. Pain, confusion, regret, like countless hands dragging him into a bottomless abyss. Meanwhile, in the seaside small town thousands of miles away. In the consultation room, Samuel looked at my checkup report and spoke gently. "The baby is healthy, but you have some anemia, pay attention to strengthening nutrition." I nodded, a weight lifting from my heart. He handed me a printed recipe. "This is a pregnancy blood replenishing diet I compiled for you, you can follow it." Looking at him, he was always so attentive and thoughtful, considering everything for me. These 2 months, thanks to his care, my pregnancy symptoms weren't so unbearable. He would remind me of timely prenatal checks, hand me a cup of warm lemon water when I felt nauseous from morning sickness, and chat with me like a friend to console me. I began to slowly open my heart to him. "Thank you, Dr. Samuel." "Call me Samuel." He looked at me, the gentleness in his eyes like spring sunlight. "Lynn, I know it might be inappropriate to say this now, but I want you to know, I like you. I won't disturb you or force you, I just want, as a friend, to stay by your side and protect you and the baby." Samuel's confession was like a pebble, creating ripples in my calm heart lake. I didn't respond immediately. Hurt too deeply by Ethan, I didn't dare to touch emotions lightly again. "Samuel, thank you. But, right now, I just want to give birth to the child properly." I politely declined. He seemed to have anticipated this outcome, showing no disappointment, just smiling gently. "I understand. It's okay, I'll always accompany you as a friend." His frankness and respect relieved me, adding an indescribable touch. In the days that followed, Samuel truly, as he said, adhered to the boundaries of friendship, silently guarding by my side. He would help carry heavy shopping bags, time reminders for folic acid, and quietly accompany me by the sea for an afternoon when I was down due to pregnancy mood swings. His presence was like a warm ray of sunlight, dispelling the last bit of haze in my heart. Gradually, a long-absent smile appeared on my face. My design career also began to improve. By chance, the engagement ring sketch I designed for a famous blogger went viral online. The unique design concept and exquisite craftsmanship attracted many clients. My account's followers started to rise, and orders increased. I established a small online studio, busy and fulfilled every day. I began to truly live for myself and strive for the upcoming child. That day, I was at the hospital for a routine pregnancy checkup. Because the fetal position was a bit low, Samuel suggested I stay for observation overnight. He busied himself handling the hospitalization procedures and settling everything. "Don't worry, it's just a minor issue, observation will be more reassuring." He softly soothed my tense emotions and specially went to the hospital cafeteria to get me a light yet nutritious dinner. Lying on the hospital bed, watching his busy figure for me, a warm current surged in my heart. At that moment, the ward door was suddenly pushed open from outside. I subconsciously looked up. A man stood at the door. He was thin, with stubble, his expensive suit wrinkled, eyes sunken and bloodshot. His whole being exuded decadence and despair. It was Ethan. He had found me. Ethan had traced me through the signatures on my online design works. When he found out the city I was in, he was almost ecstatic. He drove overnight, without sleep or rest, rushing over. He imagined countless reunion scenarios. He would kneel to beg me, hold me, and cry, tell me how regretful he was. He thought that as long as he was sincere enough, I would surely soften. However, upon arriving at my rented apartment, he found it empty. Anxiously inquiring, he finally learned from neighbors that I had come to the hospital. Rushing to the hospital full of hope, what he saw struck him like lightning. In the obstetrics corridor, Samuel was gently draping his coat over me. It's cool at night, don't catch a cold. I looked up and smiled at him, the smile carrying a dependence and reassurance I hadn't noticed myself. Thank you. This warm scene was like a red-hot iron, harshly branding Ethan's eyes. Jealousy, regret, anger, various emotions collided wildly in his chest, almost tearing him apart. How could he endure it? His wife, the mother of his child, smiling so gently at another man. He rushed forward madly, grabbing my wrist. His grip was strong, as if to crush my bones. Lynn. His voice trembled, hoarsely unrecognizable, carrying the ecstasy of regaining what was lost and deep fear. Come home with me. I was stunned by this sudden change. The intense pain in my wrist pulled me back to reality. Looking at this familiar yet strange man before me, my heart had no ripples. No hate, no love. Only bone-chilling indifference remained. I forcefully, calmly, withdrew my hand. Then, I looked up, meeting his scarlet gaze with strange and distant eyes. Mr. Ethan, we have no relation anymore. The phrase Mr. Ethan instantly drew an insurmountable chasm between us. Ethan's body shook violently, his face draining of all color. He looked at me incredulously, as if not recognizing me. What did you call me? At this moment, Samuel stepped forward, unobtrusively shielding me behind him. He looked at Ethan, his tone polite yet firm. This gentleman, Lynn, is my patient, she needs rest now. Please do not disturb her. Ethan's gaze shot like knives toward Samuel. Who are you? What's your relationship with her? I'm her attending physician, Samuel answered calmly, and also her friend. Friend? Ethan sneered, jealousy almost spewing fire from his eyes. I don't think it's that simple. He reached out again to grab me, but Samuel steadily blocked him. Two equally tall and outstanding men confronted each other silently in the hospital corridor. One decadent and mad, the other gentle and resolute. The air was thick with tension. I didn't want any more entanglements with him. Samuel, let's go. I tugged at Samuel's sleeve and turned to leave. Lynn, you're not allowed to go. Ethan roared behind me, his voice full of despair. I didn't look back. Not even a step. Ethan didn't leave. He rented a hotel-style apartment near the hospital where I was staying and settled in. He began a long and humble pursuit of his wife. Every day, he would appear downstairs at the hospital holding a large bouquet of roses. Looking down from the ward window, I could see his solitary figure standing from morning till dusk. The vibrant roses contrasted absurdly with his decadent silhouette. He would also buy various expensive supplements and ask nurses to deliver them to my ward. Bird's nest, sea cucumber, fish maw, all top grade. I never accepted any, having the nurses return them untouched. He was like a tireless believer, using every method to try to knock open my tightly closed heart. But I turned a blind eye. My heart had died the night that slap fell. Samuel, in his dual roles as friend and doctor, became my most solid shield. He would politely yet firmly block Ethan from attempting to rush into the ward. "Mr. Ethan, the patient needs rest, please do not disturb her life anymore." Ethan looked at this gentle as jade yet exuding strength everywhere man, jealous to madness. "This is between me and my wife, no need for an outsider like you to interfere. The moment you hurt her with your own hands and she signed the divorce agreement, she was no longer your wife." Samuel's tone remained calm, yet every word pierced the heart. "Everything you're doing now only troubles her, without any meaning." The atmosphere between the two men was always tense. Ethan watched Samuel's meticulous care for me, saw my growing dependence in my eyes toward him, and for the first time experienced heart-piercing pain. He finally understood how I felt back then, waiting night after night in that cold home for him to return. Despair, helplessness, heart like being cut by knives. That day, accompanied by Samuel, I was strolling in the garden downstairs of the hospital. Ethan rushed out from somewhere, blocking my path. His eyes were blood red, face full of weariness, looking even more disheveled than before. With a thud, he knelt before me. The once commanding, lofty favored son now knelt like a stray dog, humbly looking up at me. Passing patients and families cast strange glances. "Lynn, I was wrong, I really was wrong." His voice choked, with a heavy nasal tone. "Forgive me, okay? Let's go home, our family of 3, live well." He reached out to pull my hand. I subconsciously stepped back, avoiding his touch. Looking at him kneeling on the ground, my heart was unmoved. I only felt it laughable and pitiful. "Ethan, put away this hypocritical act." My voice was cold. "Your apology is too cheap. I don't need it." With that, I no longer looked at him, turned and left with Samuel's support. Behind me came his suppressed and painful cries. Those cries could no longer stir the slightest ripple in my heart. I didn't know how long Ethan knelt behind me. I didn't care. The next day, an unexpected person appeared in my ward. It was Debbie. She wore an expensive custom suit, a pigeon egg-sized diamond ring, exquisite makeup, as always arrogant and overbearing. Behind her followed 2 bodyguards, aggressive. Samuel was on rounds, only I was in the ward. "Lynn, you really have good tactics." Debbie opened with undisguised sarcasm. "Hiding in such a place, bewitching my son to the point of infatuation, not even wanting home." Leaning against the bedhead, I looked at her calmly, like watching a clown. "Something?" My indifference obviously enraged her. She took out a check from her bag and slapped it on my bedside table. "Here's 5 million. Take the money, abort the bastard in your belly, then disappear forever." Bastard. Her word choice was like a poisoned dagger, stabbing harshly into my heart. In my belly was her Gu family's own grandson. A rage burned from the bottom of my heart. I picked up the check and, in front of her, tore it bit by bit into shreds. "My child is not for you to dictate." I threw the shreds on the ground, looking at her coldly. "Want me to abort the child?" "Unless I die." "You." Debbie trembled with anger from my action, her face flushed liver red. "Don't be shameless. What do you think you are? Just a fertility tool our Gu family bought with money. If not for your mother's favor to our family back then, you wouldn't even qualify to enter our Gu family door." She roared indiscriminately. I keenly caught the information in her words. "My mom? What relation does my mom have with your family?" "My mom died of depression when I was very young, my dad rarely mentioned her past." Debbie seemed to realize she had slipped, her face changing, but quickly regaining arrogance. "Humph, want to know? Are you worthy?" At that moment, the ward door was pushed open forcefully. Ethan rushed in. He had obviously heard our argument, his face extremely ugly. "Mom. What nonsense are you spouting here?" He growled lowly at Debbie, then quickly walked to my bedside, looking at me nervously. "Lynn, don't listen to her nonsense, are you okay?" I ignored him, just staring fixedly at Debbie. "Explain clearly, what exactly is my mom's relation to your Gu family?" Ethan also sensed something wrong, turning to press his mother. "Mom, what's going on? What's Lynn's mother to you?" Debbie, pressed by us, retreated step by step, her emotions completely out of control. In her fury, she blurted out the secret hidden for years. "What relation? Her mom is a jinx. Back then, if not for your dad being soft-hearted, listening to Lynn's grandfather and investing in that lousy project, how could the Gu family almost go bankrupt? We were kind-hearted, but what happened? The Lynn family betrayed us, nearly dooming us. The Lynn company went bankrupt, her mom died of depression, serves them right. I just hate her. Hate her face that's identical to her mom's. If not to repay that so-called favor from the Lynn family back then, I would die before letting you marry this woman. I wanted you to marry Chloe long ago. The Chu family helped us so much back then, marrying Chloe is the best repayment to our Gu family." Earth-shattering. Every word from Debbie was like a heavy hammer smashing into Ethan and my hearts. Ethan's entire worldview collapsed in this moment. It turned out that behind his father's entrepreneurial success was such filthy betrayal. It turned out that all his mother's difficulties and biases toward me stemmed from such unsavory old matters. It turned out that what he always thought was his debt and responsibility to Chloe was just shackles imposed by his mother. He staggered back, face devoid of color, looking at his mother with eyes full of strangeness and fear. And I, upon hearing the truth, felt ice-cold all over. My mother's death, my grandfather's family bankruptcy, it all was inextricably linked to the Gu family. And I had married the enemy's son, washed and cooked for him, bore his child. What irony! Looking at Ethan's collapsed and despairing face, the last remnants of affection for the Gu family vanished in an instant. Only endless hatred remained. The truth was like a sharp knife, dissecting all hypocritical appearances, revealing the bloody interior. Ethan's world collapsed. The father he had always been proud of turned out to be a treacherous villain. The mother he had always respected and been filial to turned out to be a vicious executioner. Everything he possessed was built on the destruction of another family. He was utterly disheartened. After roaring everything, Debbie also collapsed limply to the ground, as if all strength had been drained. I looked coldly at this farce, my inner calm terrifying. Upon learning the truth, all entanglements of love and hate became unimportant. I only wanted justice for my mother, for my innocent grandfather's family. I asked Samuel to help find a lawyer and began collecting evidence of the Gu family's betrayal back then. The years were long, many evidences lost. But justice has a long arm. We ultimately pieced together a complete chain of evidence from old papers and informed persons from that time. Upon learning of my actions, Ethan offered no obstruction. He seemed to have completely given up resistance, immersed in immense pain and self-reproach. A week later, he proactively found me. He placed a signed equity transfer agreement before me. 50% of Gu Corporation's shares. "Lynn, this is me, on behalf of my father, returning to your Lynn family." His voice was hoarse, eyes vacant. "I know this can't make up for anything, but I'll use the rest of my life to atone." Looking at the agreement, I didn't refuse. This was what the Gu family owed our Lynn family, I accepted it rightfully. Meanwhile, upon learning Ethan couldn't marry her and that the Gu family would likely be severely damaged by the old scandal, Chloe completely revealed her true face. No longer pretending to be weak, she found Ethan and demanded a huge breakup fee. It turned out that from the beginning, her approach to Ethan was instigated by her parents, wanting to squeeze the last benefits from the crisis-ridden Gu family. The so-called old affections were just a carefully planned scam. Ethan looked at this woman before him, with sharp words and eyes full of calculation, feeling only absurdity and pity. He waved his hand, had finance give her a sum of money, and dismissed her to disappear forever from his world. At this point, he was betrayed by all around him. Father's hypocrisy, mother's viciousness, first love scheming, turned his life completely into a joke. He had personally hurt the only person who loved him and lost her forever. He had nothing left. I accepted the shares Ethan transferred, becoming one of Gu Corporation's largest shareholders. But I didn't return to that family full of scheming and filth. Using this money, I established my own jewelry design studio in the seaside small town. My career flourished, quickly making a name in the industry. I was no longer the Lynn Mrs. dependent on a man, I was just Lynn, a resilient, independent single mother. A year later, on a warm spring day with blooming flowers, I gave birth to a cute son. The child resembled me, with gentle features. Samuel stayed by my side throughout, from pregnancy to delivery, providing the warmest protection and most professional care. In the deep night when the child cried, he would skillfully pick him up, softly humming lullabies. When I was down with postpartum emotions, he would patiently console me and take me to see the most beautiful sunrise. His love wasn't as intense as Ethan's, but like a trickling stream, silently permeating every corner of my life, warm and healing. As for Ethan, after handling all company handovers, he resigned as president. He didn't disturb me again. I heard he sold all his personal assets and established a charity fund specifically to help families bankrupted by commercial fraud. Then, he went alone to distant lands, to remote mountainous areas to teach. He used the rest of his life to repent for the sins he and his father committed. The Gu family, due to this huge upheaval and scandal, was severely weakened, quickly declining in the business world and gradually fading from people's view. Another sunny afternoon. I was playing with my son on the seaside beach. Samuel walked to my side, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. He knelt on one knee and took out a ring. That ring was the one I had once sketched in my draft book, the wedding ring of my dreams. "Lynn, will you marry me?" He looked up at me, the deep affection and gentleness in his eyes enough to melt all the world's ice. Looking at my son toddling beside me, giggling, then at this man before me who gentled the years and amazed the times. My eyes gradually moistened. I extended my hand, smiling, and nodded. Sunlight sprinkled on the sea surface, sparkling. All past pains and shadows had vanished like smoke. My brand new life was just beginning.